purpose of today's workshop is to get young people to think a little bit about heritage and also legacy and leadership. So what does it mean for young South Africans today, and what does heritage mean to them? The second aim of the workshop is also to get them to start thinking about what their journey has been, being part of the project, and to have them go through a series of exercises so that they can kind of capture their story. And it links very nicely to this year's theme for Heritage Day, which is My Story.
They are here to reflect on what has happened over the year to them, and also then to write about and produce something artistic, writing, multimedia sort of record or documentation of progress and shifting and how their thinking is altered and where they see themselves taking this in the future, because that really is the point for them then to engage fully in the transformation of this country.
When you guys all started this project, you had a very specific idea in mind. You were in a very specific place in your personal journey in the beginning of the year, a lot of things happening. Does the things that I say in this application still resonate with me? Have I reached any goals that I thought I would reach when I wrote this? What has shifted for me? Has the concept of freedom changed? Has things happened in my life that kind of illuminated what reconciliation is, might be, isn't? All of those things. What does it mean to be a young leader? But for me, I would like for you to read the text, and also feel free to engage with it. If you want to scribble, scribble on it. If you want to scratch out what isn't relevant.
And I remember being in the library and writing it, and it was late, and I was with Jamie, my boyfriend, and he read it, and we went and I were together, and then we broke up a month ago, so that's weird, but we're kind of back together, but it's still growth of just where I was at in that, and then this application. And the actual application was very past oriented. It was I've done this, and this is why I should be on this, which I think you do in applications, but it was still weird being so retrospective and reading that. And right now I'm very future orientated, so that contrast was interesting because I'm graduating, I'm doing my honors applications, it's very what I'm going to be doing. Also interesting contrast was it was very much what I've done, and I think now I'm trying to concentrate on who I am and how I am.
Because I use the word tolerance in my essay. Right now I absolutely don't believe in that word at all. I don't stand for tolerance. Tolerance is a concept that reinforces privilege. It protects the privileged. No one is put on the earth to be tolerated. We all are here. We deserve to be free and loved and to be in a position where we get to pursue our own greatness as we see fit. That's the first change I'd made. And then I wrote about LGBTI issues because I work at the Gender Equity Unit on campus, and that's part of the concern that we have. So in the essay I said transgendered/transsexual. I would not say transsexual now, I'd just say transgendered, because the gender is what's important, the part you play in society more than what's between your legs.
I'm a very critical person, which you guys have gathered. So, I'm just more critical. If I was going to do something, I would be ugh, but can I really do it? And what am I trying to do? And how do I affect people and stuff? And if I think I'm going to do a substandard job, I wouldn't even try it. But everyone was kind of yeah, I do this for the community and this and this and this. And I'm Yeah, but like, how are you even structuring what you're doing with the community? Can you even read though? Like, what values are you? That's my first reaction. But everyone else was like, no, I'm doing it, and it's so exciting. So that's something that even though even though like I haven't taken the steps forward, and shit, I'm gonna stop talking just now. Taking the steps forward in my life, I do think that this has been a very it's a communal space. It's been a nice space. I've heard a lot of different stories, and it's a space where I feel inspired all the time, in a space where I know that I can get support and other people will support each other regardless. So I'm very thankful for that.
Like a lot of layers to what freedom is, like you said. And then I also noticed that like our backgrounds play a big role. Like they play a much bigger role than I thought. And then I also noticed that and I also noticed that freedom might have to do with belonging, because I felt like a lot of people didn't feel like they belonged, and I started asking myself questions like, okay, my questions were like, and I also noticed a lot of emotions as well. So I asked myself, like, have we been suppressing things for too long? And is reconciliation being pushed down people's throats? Like, I was asking myself all these things after this camp. So that was good.
My experience with the program has been enriching. But however, I have a few reservations, because when I came here, I had a different perspective of what reconciliation is. And now that I'm here, I have a different perspective of what reconciliation actually is. Gathering the different people's perspectives, it has broadened my perspective, because I thought my perspective was the only perspective that there is. But now, attending the program, I've seen that there are a lot of perspectives out there, and that my view is not actually the view. There are certain things that I think affect the youth. As you mentioned, background, there's a lot of impact as to where you're going. I see where I come from, the challenges that I've seen are that lack of exposure and education are the things that are holding the youth back. You know, before this, I also had my way of thinking. Before I was exposed to different schools and different races, I thought like this was the only way of life. Like, this is where I grew up, this is where I belong, this is my comfort zone. There's no life other than this. So I was falling into the trap, actually, because when you grow up in a township, you grow up being exposed to certain things and not others. But when you actually go out there and meet other people, you see that the world is actually bigger than your comfort zone and your place of birth and your circumstances. I realized that in order for us to inflict change, we need to go back to where we come from and show those people that, hey, listen here, this is not the only way of life, okay? And actually expose them to different societies, to different views and different things in life. Because some people grew up seeing the same. Some people have never even been to Cape Town. Like, that's how deep it is, like, in the townships. Like, some people don't even know, like, there are these projects, you know? Some people don't even know that you have your island grays. People just want to get out. You know what I mean? So I've learned that exposure and education are the most important things, and it's up to us, like as the youth who have been exposed to these things, to transfer the skills that we've learned in order to create a better society.
I've definitely realized that reconciliation is something that we have to work on, us, young people, and it isn't something that just happens. It's hard work and it's difficult, and it requires give and take on both sides.
Yeah, and I think that like our responsibility as the youth of today is, I would always say we have the ability of, or not the ability, the advantage of kind of being objective, because we inherited these things, but we can be more objective than what our parents can, so we can actually pass forward better traits so that they do not inherit what we inherited from our past.
For us, it's just like, for me, it's just like I wanted to be treated equal, you know. I don't want to be powerful or someone else, you know. But I deserve equal rights. I deserve equal with everything, you know. So it's that kind of thing that's going on, you know. And with even like here in South Africa, we see in the forms, you know, we have to tick whether you're black, colored, white, or what, you know. You know, some people like me don't want to be categorized, you know. I want to be seen as like a human being, as someone, you know. that has a life.
Rid of that structure, that system, because the white man still thinks he's superior to the black man, and according to politics and economics, he still is actually. So yeah, I think we need to find a way of getting rid of the informal underlying oppression and racism and all of that.
That comes back again to this whole community healing and all those type of things. There are so many issues that hasn't been dealt with. Just the structure has been taken away, but those issues are still very real, and that's not being dealt with. Because it looks like everything is okay because that structure is gone.
With all this inequality reconciliation part, how does I play my individual part? How do I factor in the individuality that because I am black, then I can get this job, or because I'm a female? But what about that as a person, that I can, with my own ability, be able to be in that place, be able to sit in there, be able to do that with just being an individual, not just being described as being black, as this is your past, you have to pass this phase, so to be that, you have to reconcile, you have to consult the past. So I think all that complexity with the reconciliation, with the past, with the future, with how things are economically, politically, the freedom, it's just all confusion and complexity of the issue of reconciliation and bringing about change.
The young people there are from across the Western Cape. They come from communities like Hanover Park, Guguletu, Khayelitsha, Bo-Kaap. So they come from all across the Western Cape, and they were part of a youth camp, and they were selected, 30 of them, on 5 days, and they have been part of this project for the past 6 months. They've had workshops once a month, just exploring what does it mean to be a young person. What do I do with memory or with history or the past? How does it link to the present, and how do I look to my future?
I was reflecting on my application. I saw that I still hold the same values. I still want to change the status quo, and I still seek to develop my leadership skills. But what I've noticed is that throughout my life I've been institutionalized. I've been in certain spaces to such an extent that it has clouded my judgment of how the realities are hitting the masses out there, people who are not in groups, people who are not in academic institutions, people who are not associated with people with parallel thinking. I've realized that when I go back to my community, of which I left some 3 years ago, I still see the same youth that I grew up with doing the same things, sitting in that same corner. I ask myself, but why? Why do you keep doing the same thing if it doesn't elevate you in your life, if it doesn't put you in a different position? I believe that in order to be able to change, you need to advance every day. You can't keep doing the same thing if it's gonna. But I realized that I judged too soon, because when I spoke to these people, I realized that exposure and education were at the core of their problems. Like, they haven't been exposed to other ways of thinking, other ways of living. They only know and are constrained to their environments, their comfort zones, the place of which they were born. They grow up thinking that this is the way of life. Like, there's no other way out there. They haven't interacted with other people, other races who are facing the same struggles.
If you start talking about these things, you uncover a lot of things that you don't necessarily always want to think about, and you kind of you stir the pot, and then it makes you think about a lot of things that some people just don't want to think about. So then that forces you to ask questions. Next person, being a leader and doing things that I have in mind, being more practical about doing things, and the type of conversations I have with people. The next one, I'm doing shit. I used to just chill. That was the statement. And she says she's immersing herself in the world around her. More interaction and more engagement. Next one, nothing really, but ... Understand people's frustrations, getting out of my own shoes, space and comfort zone, interacting with people, thinking about the realities of what's happening in South Africa. And finally, people getting to interact with each other has initiated interaction. So I think being in this space has allowed us to understand what other people are going through, that we often don't, and our automatic reaction is just to not engage with other people because it's just going to confuse us and make us uncomfortable and sad. And so I think it's good that we interacted with each other so that we can understand where we're at, and that makes us more sensitive to other people, which makes loving them easier.
One of the things Lorna said is that through her experience with IJR, it's like, I think it's reiterating what Caitlin said about how we had this broad idea, and we have like this we have this goal, like yours specifically is peace, you know, and then sometimes we get paralyzed by how do we achieve this, and what's the IJR process has done for her, and I think it's what's done for most of us, is to break it down into small, achievable chunks, things that we can see, things that we can affect immediately, and therefore start seeing the change instead of saying, well, if I don't achieve world peace, somehow I've failed. I like to think about things like how do we connect with people from different backgrounds or whatever, but in your daily life it's easy to segment. Like I'm sure in my different courses and whatever, like I've had people from different backgrounds, and I was able to relate to them in an academic setting, because on an academic setting you're all on the same playing field. I think you guys can all attest to it, is that like we were forced to hang out with each other. So it wasn't just you come to the workshop and you guys talk. It was like I had to know your story. I had to go and walk up to Waterval with you. I had to create a video with you, which means that it was a different kind of relationship. It was not just something that was a mind thing. It was like, I know how you are personally, and I think that was very important.
Looking back on my essay, I realized that the words that was written was merely just words. It was very beautifully written words, but I don't think that, and this is what we said, we didn't truly understand the concept of reconciliation and what that meant. And through this camp, we finally understand what reconciliation means, and we understand what we as South Africans need to be freed from. We have come to realize that all of our differences, which I once thought were petty differences and we just need to get over it, those are very real differences. And I now see them as beautiful differences, because we can use our differences, we can use our different ideas and our different strategies and come together to create change. And it is only like I would not be able to create change on my own. Like I need each and every one of you and everyone out there to help me where I might miss things. All of you can contribute. So we each contribute to creating change.
I found that this is a very, very safe space, and a lot more of these spaces need to be created out there. But how? That's the question. Because what we're speaking about here is reconciliation, which is beautiful and all of that. But how do you, as a person living in a township, unemployed, not knowing where your next meal is going to come from, how do you reconcile with the past when it's still very much affecting you today? How do you now suddenly, and I was also mentioning this in our group discussion, that I think getting rid of apartheid was simply getting rid of systematic oppression. Informal oppression is still there. Underlying oppression and discrimination is still there. But because the idea of us being free and democracy has taken over so much, we think we are free, whereas the reality of it, most of us aren't.
For me, a big issue has been, am I guilty? In what way am I guilty because of the color of my skin? And I'm starting to think that maybe in some way I am. And when I bring up these ideas, like with my parents or my boyfriend, the reaction is very strong. The reaction is to go, you're not guilty, it's not your fault. And so it's just a reflection that the space is artificial. And even though it's incredibly difficult to take this conversation outside of the space, we have to. We have to. We're here now, and we can't go back, and this is almost meaningless if we don't take it outside of the space.
So it's only by engagement that we can have compassion for people. And the reason that we have so much tension in South Africa is because we don't interact. We don't have compassion because we don't know what's going on. I know a lot of white guys that have never sat with a black guy. And he'll tell me how irritated he is with black people, but then he doesn't know black people. And we just need to get over that.
But there's something about proximity. There's something about having to spend time, even if it's just being in the physical space of somebody you wouldn't normally, that does something, even if you don't speak to that person. That you might not realize that something is shifting for you now, but later on you'll realize just being in a space, seeing this person as something other than what I had imagined them to be before starting already starts shifting. And so for me, it would be now seeing a young white female or a young black male. It completely shatters my perception that it's a homogenous group. Because it's so easy when we're talking about groupings and people that we paint them as this. This is all that they are. This is how every single one of them are. But then you meet just one person and it's like, you know what, if there's one person that's different, what's not to say that there's others? And it's not, when we don't live with this illusion, we're not disillusioned. I mean, we don't live with an illusion that just because one person is expressing something that resonates with us, that everybody's like that. No, we know that there are people who've got very strong views on things, people who don't agree with us. But, like you guys said, it's important that we create these spaces. And like you asked, how can we creating spaces like that is through conversation, through just saying, hey man, what do you think about this? How can we pool our resources and our thinking to create opportunities for people to engage?
The Ashley Kriel Youth Leadership Development Project was started and put into place in order to commemorate the lives of young people who have contributed towards the struggle, especially the namesake of the project, Ashley Kriel, who was a young man who died in his 20s. He was killed by the apartheid police for his activities in identifying what was wrong in the country and deciding to make a stand against it. So the project aims to kind of bring young people together, whether it's on electronic platforms, whether it's in physical platforms, in dialogues, and in various conversations to talk about their issues, but also to find ways in which to see each other, find ways in which to link the similarities that they share, but also to discuss how it is that young people now can kind of connect to the past, but also think about the future in terms of building socially cohesive and inclusive societies.
Heritage Day is so understated because it's Braai Day now, and like, what if you don't braai on Braai Day? Then like, what are you? Like, what if you don't go out and buy like a whole bunch of meat and like just sit there and braai? Like, are you even part of this country? Like, are you celebrating your heritage? And also on gender division of labor, I was in a meeting and we were talking about like heritage, Braai Day, whatever, and they were like, no, we need to put up a roster for all the guys to braai. And I'm just like, what? So I can't braai? Are you saying that like just because I'm a woman, like I have to go and make salad in the kitchen? Like it was so silly, and I was very disappointed in the people around me.
That it connects to the first point about consumerism, that because it keeps us distracted from focusing on the issues that we are about, so that we don't even notice that we are now choosing to celebrate this holiday in a way that actually reinforces previous inequalities. So by saying that the women are going to be in the kitchen making salads while the men are outdoors drinking beer and braaiing, by not seeing that we are dividing labor on the basis of gender, we're colluding with a system that has hijacked our heritage, that has hijacked kind of our ways of commemorating our history.
Capitalism is here and now, and instant gratification and constantly consuming and taking in, and so I think that's the difference. And if we're not careful, we slowly fall into that value system of capitalism.
If you look at socioeconomic status, it requires an African child to give back home, but we don't do that anymore because we want to look like every other colleague who's wearing Louis Vuitton to work and Guess, which costs 800 Rand for a pair of jeans, which is absolutely ridiculous. But anyways, it's so amazing for me how someone who's earning 40,000 Rand a month, which is twice as much as my mother makes, but can't go home and give their mother money for food. So you find that African mothers, African grandmothers are in the villages, you know, waiting for their child to come back because they've broken their backs.
But the one narrative that I think that South Africans need to forget, because I think it's really problematic, is this idea of a rainbow nation and we're culturally diverse, which we are. Granted, we are. But I think that ignores the fact that, in many, all over the world, there are countries that are more diverse than South Africa. Even on this continent, we do not speak the most languages. We do not have the most official languages. We do not have the most tribes. Nor do we have the most amounts of immigration. And even in Europe and stuff, people like to think that they're stagnant places. They're not. They have long histories of slavery. They have long histories of immigrants from India, from Africa, from Eastern Europe, from Asia, that all, for example, London is hugely multicultural, but that is not a calling point. To call yourself a cultural hub, I think, is disingenuous.
We have adopted this notion of saying that, yes, this is our history. As I said, we are different, and this is what we have in terms of culture, of languages, of race, of history, the events that happened. I think because as a country, we're trying to move from the apartheid era of oppression to this revolution now of saying, no, we're all together and we're about freedom, we're about change, we're about development.
But the point is that a lot of South Africans are yeah, people come to South Africa because we're so diverse. I'm yeah, but so are most places. You're not unique in that. The only reason why you think that is because it's been shoved down our throats, but it's something that we needed to be told as a country to make ourselves, to open up the minds of South Africans. But to have that as a calling card, to be we are unique and we are a rainbow nation, as if to say that other peoples don't have diverse histories, I think is very problematic, and I think it's something that we need to interrogate. I think that the story needs to change.
We're not necessarily comparing ourselves with other countries and other nations in terms of diversity. We're just saying that, Faye, look at Europe. Europe is diverse because it's built up of many countries with different cultures. But here, we have one country with different cultures, different traditions, different languages in one country. You go to the EU, you get England, you get predominantly English-speaking people. You go to Italy, you get predominantly Italians who share the same language. But here, you get one country with 9 official languages, with different tribes. That's something to reinforce. That's something to be proud of. I'm not saying that we're comparing ourselves with other countries, no. What you're trying to say is that we should get rid of that and come up with a new story. It's overrated.
No, what I'm saying is that coming from a space where my parents are both Ugandan and having to deal with the fact that I'm both Ugandan and South African, and having dealt with South Africans all my life since I've lived here since I was 2, what often happens is that South Africans, a lot of the time, also we've been dealing with our issues, but a lot of the time South Africans somehow feel that they're better than other countries. And I'm saying especially African countries. And my thing is no, you're not unique, especially in the African continent. You're unique in the fact that everyone has their own histories. But the thing is to call yourself to have that as a calling card, a rainbow nation, I'm saying that most countries on this African continent, barring countries such as Somalia who for some reason has the whole population is homogenous. South Africa is not a unique place. In terms of the fact that it has different cultures, the fact that it has different languages, at all, it is not. It really is not a unique space.
What young people are doing now through this project, but also through their own personal initiatives and interventions, is identifying what is wrong in their country, but not just the country, in their community, in their social setting, and trying to bring about positive change in the small spaces that they find themselves in. The common cause could be bringing about social change. So that is how young people can keep alive the legacy of Ashley Kriel and kind of reimagine what it is that he would be doing today.
I firmly believe that communication starts at the end of your comfort zone. If you want to have meaningful interactions and conversations with people, you need to step out your comfort zone, get into create a space that the person that you're speaking to, conversing with, is comfortable so that they're willing to share their story. You need to have a bit of self-confidence, so you trust yourself that you can hold the conversation, that you can go and ask those meaningful questions that you are on. Obviously, it will be up to the person that you're talking to how much they're willing to share, but I believe that if you can carry yourself in a manner that's trustworthy and reliable, and you're outside your comfort zone, I'm sure you can have a meaningful conversation with anybody.
I think the most important thing to remember if you're going to be interacting with people is to know that they come from completely different backgrounds, most likely. You have no idea what people's stories are. So when you do make that first step, be sure to just understand that your experiences and your personality aren't necessarily going to be the same as this other person. So you need to be sensitive to their background. Oh, and a really good thing is to ask lots of questions, because people like to talk about themselves. And if they're really genuine and sincere, then people are going to like you, because being interested in is something that people appreciate. And if they're worth it, they will ask you questions back, and then you can get into a discussion. But also make sure that you remember that it won't necessarily always work out. Be ready for failure. It's going to happen at some point.
I think an important thing is to remember that change starts from within. So the journey starts with yourself. So as much as you realize that you may be disadvantaged in some ways, I think it's also important to realize that you actually experience privilege in other ways. So whether it's based on race, on class, on education level, on sexual orientation or religion or ability or citizenship or whatever else, you experience a kind of privilege that comes directly at the cost of someone else's. So I think it's important to make peace with that. And so when you do that, it opens up your mind and it opens up your heart when you enter conversations with other people. So you will understand that even at times when you mean well, that sometimes you may be a little bit off in your interactions with other people. But that doesn't have to hinder you from initiating those interactions in the first place. But once we learn from that, we can move forward and be more likely to hold hands, be more likely to now want to work together in order to move forward.
What I would say to young people, how I would advise them to open up and start conversations is they need to realize that not all the conversations that they share with people from different backgrounds will be clean. The thing about getting into courageous conversations is realizing that you need to dig deep into the nitty-gritties, and it won't always be clean, but be courageous enough to speak about it, because these are the matters that hang over our heads and cause a certain awkwardness amongst ourselves, whereby because I'm facing certain issues, I will not speak to someone because I assume that they're not facing the same issues. So the crux of what I'm saying is that not all conversations will be clean and smooth sailing, but be courageous enough to get into it. Dig deep, because that's how we overcome obstacles, by facing them.
I would like to share a message with all the youth out there. I would like to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. It is not impossible to achieve your dreams. You need to open yourselves up to possibilities and be engaged, and seek opportunities to develop yourself as a person, and never let your circumstances define who you are. All I have to say is that, black child, it's possible. Push our little dreams.
What I would say to anyone, any youth who feels that they want to be part of something bigger than themselves, it would be to create safe spaces in which we can all just be. And I know that sounds really complicated, but it really isn't. If you can have you and your friends together, or any way you can be, and try to reserve judgment and just be, and to understand people from where they're coming from, and understand that we all have different backgrounds, and that could be about where we live, or our financial situation, or even the sorts of beliefs that we hold. If we understand that those are important stories to everyone, and everyone holds them within them and then within themselves.
Guys, let's just get involved and let's stop this whole thing of apathy. Like, it's not on. We need to get more involved. If we want our country to move forward and if we want to see change, then we have to get our hands dirty, get involved and do something about it. We need to step up to the challenge and just do something. Do something. That's all we need. Do something. Get involved in conversations. Don't be afraid. Don't worry about being politically correct, because right now we're over that. Right now it's about facing our past and moving on and going forward.